Hello and welcome to How Do You Cope with me, John Robbins. This is the show where I sit down with special guests to talk about the challenges they've overcome and the coping mechanisms they use in their everyday lives. Today's guest is the comedian, writer and podcaster Suzi Ruffell. Suzi first performed stand-up comedy whilst at drama school in London, and she's taken multiple sold-out shows to the Edinburgh Festival and also appeared on many different TV and radio shows. She's the host of the podcasts Like-Minded Friends with Tom Allen, Big Kick Energy with Maisie Adam, and the solo offering Out with Suzi Ruffell, where she interviews inspirational people from the queer community. Last year, she released her memoir, Am I Having Fun Now? And the book covers, amongst other things, her lifelong journey with anxiety, her struggles to understand her own sexuality, and her journey of both coming out as a lesbian and becoming a parent. The paperback of Am I Having Fun Now is out on the 28th of May. And in our conversation, we spoke about how Suzi's anxiety manifested in childhood, how stand-up comedy provides relief from her head, and what lessons she's learned from becoming a mum. And before we get started, don't forget that you can now watch every new episode of How Do You Cope on YouTube. Just search for How Do You Cope Pod. And you can, of course, listen to all episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and do hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. For more info or to get in touch, head to howdoyoupod.com. Well, it's a very warm welcome to Suzi Ruffell. How are you doing, Suzi?
I'm good, thanks, John. How are you?
I'm good. I haven't seen you for ages, and I love your shoes.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm wearing socks that were given away free for a gig we've both done.
Yes, Laughterama.
Laughterama socks, the worst named gig in the UK.
Yeah, great gigs.
Very nice
names.
gig, terrible name. And I've just finished your book, Am I Having Fun Now? Which I absolutely loved.
Oh, thanks.
And I thought your description of childhood anxiety was especially evocative. And I'm really interested in how a lot of the people I've spoken to about anxiety and OCD, there's this sort of Venn diagram of childhood thinking and anxious thinking. There seems to be an overlap between, no, don't step on the floor because it's lava, and if you step on it, you'll die. And then you talk about, if I don't outrun the bus, my mum will die. So I wonder at what point for you that world of childhood imagination and anxious thought sort of moved from one to the other. Because if you said to someone, oh, if I don't outrun the bus, my mum will die, they would think, oh, there's maybe something going on there. But if you said, oh, there's a monster in the corner, and if I step on this cushion, he won't get me.
Yeah.
They'd think that's a game.
As a child, yeah. I think that it happened around the time that my grandfather died. And I was close to him as any sort of 6-7-year-old can be to a grandparent that they see once or twice a week, But I think the thing that I realised more in that moment was people die. People die, and that means I might die, and that means my family might die. And I mentioned this in the book, but the night that my grandfather died, I was staying at my friend's house. And in my child brain, I decided that it was my fault that my granddad had died because I was staying at a friend's house because I was having fun. I should have been at home. And had I been at home, I would have stopped it. I would have stopped the cancer. And I'm noticing this now I've got a 6-year-old, and, they make sense of everything through stories. And so that was a story that I told myself. I decided that this was why this terrible thing had happened. And so then it was my job to make sure everyone was okay. And so whether it was flicking a light switch on and off, whether it was outrunning the bus, whether it was climbing up the stairs without touching the carpet and just going on the banister. And it was almost like, well, once I had thought of it, if I don't do it, then something terrible is going to happen. So I need to do it, and I need to do it quick. And I would say that's something that's still, I remember when I was opening for Josh Widdicombe, good friend of both of ours.
Opening on tour,
on tour. Sorry, yeah. When I was on the road with him, I remember once he said there was a ping pong table backstage, and he said, if we don't get to 100, we're both going to have bad gigs. And I don't know when it goes from like that sort of fun, playful thing to I'm going to have a terrible gig tonight if I don't do this thing or that thing. And which I don't do that sort of thinking so much anymore. But actually, 3 weeks ago, I had a real anxious dip, the first one I've had in ages, which was a particularly hard one. And one of the first ways that I noticed it was coming was that I started pressing on my door once I'd locked it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to Alice, my wife, I said, I've started checking everything. I think I'm like, the anxiety is really coming. And then it came as like a whoosh, and it was bad for about 4 days. And then it sort of desisted again and off it went.
So is that like that example of the ping pong table with Josh? That's like a sort of almost like a fun childlike challenge.
Yes.
Whereas is anxious thought more of a threat?
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. And that's it's I think how Josh would have seen it. And indeed how I saw that. I didn't think I was going to have a bag if we did 200. That was just a playful thing that we were doing. But I think it's interesting how I had never thought of that until you said about the monster in the corner. And I don't know when that moment flips. I don't know whether it's excitement and fear and what the two things can be. But it's certainly something where I've tried to control.
Do you think all anxiety is a fear of death? Some people do say that, in that if you sort of follow the thread of each of them, at the very end, there's some kind of fear of either dying ourselves or people we love dying.
I think more people we love dying or an ostracization from the people that I love. I don't know that I'm scared of dying, but then I've never had a near-death experience and I've never had an illness.
That's a huge claim.
Do you think?
You've never had an illness?
What, like a serious illness?
Right,
I've never been hospitalised with an illness. Oh no, I'm not one of those people
Otherwise, we need to
I
get
don't
you
get
studied.
sick. Yeah, COVID didn't get me.
You just manifest good health.
Yeah, and I think if you don't, that's on you.
Yeah.
No, I've never had like a serious illness. So I don't know that whether I would feel very frightened then. I'm sure part of me would, but it's always been threats around other people. Something going wrong, something. And then there was a period where it was me saying the wrong thing or me doing the wrong thing. I think I read John Ronson's book, You've Been Publicly Shamed, when I was in a particular dip in my mental health. And I think that got in there in a way that was unhelpful.
That's interesting because I have had big portions of my life with sort of public shaming anxieties. And I found that book quite helpful once I'd been through every single tweet I'd ever sent and deleted all the bad ones.
Sure.
So I did like a sort of screening. There was only actually one that I deleted, and annoyingly, it was right the way back at the start. So it took hours to go through them all. But a bit like a sort of, political party screening a candidate. Tell us about your social media checks.
Okay, so this is when the anxiety has really taken hold. I will check what I've posted, then I will check what I've liked, then I will check anything that I've commented and make sure that I've not said anything that could be misconstrued or there's not like a spelling mistake that could be whatever. Like and also make sure that I've not accidentally posted a picture of my child, which I wouldn't do because my phone's set up so that those photos go into a different file. But so that the long and short of it is that I can't really do social media. And when I do, but I have someone that helps me with it.
It is an anxiety machine.
Yeah.
And when are you doing these checks?
Like at midnight.
Yeah.
Which is, I would say, bad time to look at your phone.
Definitely. And a bad time to be asking the question, have I done anything terrible, just before I turn out the light.
But do you find, what's your relationship like with social media?
So when I was drinking, it was very much first thing I would do in the morning, check Twitter, check my texts, check Instagram, check WhatsApp. I haven't done anything terrible. I haven't got into some argument or
Because
whatever.
you would have done that when you were drunk.
Yeah, but I never had.
No.
I remember once tweeting, stumbling up the stairs hammered, and there was this big argument on Twitter about furlough. And I tweeted something about like, I think it was about Liverpool furloughing their squad, so using government money. And I made some comment. I think I was probably saying like, "Oh, it's fine, isn't it?" And everyone like piled on. I immediately deleted it. And that's like that's as bad as it ever got.
Yeah.
But still, the daily checks would have to happen because you're missing parts of your memory. So you think, what awful thing have I done? And you talk about the fear of like, what if I posted a picture of myself nude, which is such a great anxiety to have. Because it's sort of impossible to do.
Yeah, totally. And I don't have. I'm also not someone, and no shame. But I'm not someone that takes photos of myself nude. So I know those photos don't exist. But then I'll go like, oh my God, I was texting someone while I was getting out the shower. What about if I listen to music sometimes from my phone in the shower. What about if I accidentally turn on the camera and then it's a spiral.
I have a very strong memory when I was a kid watching Why Don't You, which was a kids' TV program, from behind the sofa when I was getting changed out of my pajamas so that they couldn't see me naked through the telly.
Yeah.
So I wanted to sort of play a hypothetical game.
Geez. Okay, go for it.
So say someone has hacked your phone.
Yeah.
Or somehow you have accidentally posted a picture of yourself nude or a picture of your child or given away some person, like your long card number. Is there a chance that the reality of that situation is actually less stressful than the anxiety about it?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think the fear of what if is far greater than, oh, this thing's happened and now we deal with it.
Because you can do something about it.
Then. Totally.
It sort of resolves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's sort of, when I'm not going through a phase where I feel anxious, which is like today, I'm in a pretty good place. I can see, I know that I would be able to cope with these things. But when you're in a bad headspace, it's hard to see the wood for the trees, really.
Stand-up seems like an unlikely profession for someone who suffers from anxiety. And yet, I would probably say quite a high proportion of people who do stand-up have like a higher level of anxiety or more frequently anxious people than in the general population. Why do you think that might be?
Control.
Okay.
I think that when I'm doing my tour shows, I feel a bit of nerves, but that's just because I really want them to have fun. But I feel I'm in control. I know the show. I know what's going to happen. The lights are on me. I'm amplified. I'm controlling the situation. I mean, I do crowd work, but only as much as I want to do. I think that's part of it. I also think there's, I guess not all people with anxiety, but for me, there's like a compulsion to talk about stuff. And to talk about it in a public way sort of feels radical. Or is it radical, or is it just the sort of thrill of feeling, of talking about stuff, I think. But I don't know. I think that, because that's something that's been asked of me before, like, why do you do stand-up if you feel so anxious? But I never feel anxious about stand-up. I never feel anxious about going on stage. I feel nerves, don't get me wrong. I felt anxious when I've done TV before, when I've been on panel shows and I've like got in my head and been like, I haven't said anything for ages, and oh no, and then I felt anxiety, and I've left studios feeling like, oh God, I didn't enjoy that, and I don't know. And then obviously when it goes on telly, you're like, oh, that's fine. But I don't know that I've ever felt that going on stage. I enjoy the liveness of it.
I've sometimes wondered if people who are more prone to anxiety and sort of catastrophizing are spending so much time rehearsing in their head that it's almost like you're refining and refining what you think and feel about things. so that then performing it is almost like life is a dress rehearsal for the things you're going to say on stage.
Yeah.
And it enables you to come up with prose quite quickly because, I'm so used to cross-examining myself and the things I do, from like very minor stuff to big stuff, that then being on stage and having to sort of improvise that doesn't feel like much more of an extra step.
Yeah, I think that there's a excitement to that as well, because I feel similarly. I rehearse things over and over and again in my head. But when you're in front of an audience, you can't help but be in the moment.
Mm.
And I think that's quite addictive.
So it's like an escape from that headspace.
Kind of. I mean, I feel very sort of, when I'm on stage, I feel very sort of at peace. There's only sort of the one voice in my head at that time, and it's the voice doing the show.
Mm.
Whereas a lot of other times I'm, if I'm with a friend or if I'm, I find it like really hard to concentrate on a conversation if there's something else happening. Like there's just a cleanness to it.
You can't dwell on anything when you're on stage.
No, you can't be thinking about what happened just a minute ago, because you've got to do the next bit.
Suzi, you're a lesbian.
This is true. and even with you and your cute glasses, it's still true.
And in your book, you tell a sort of a coming out story that's perhaps less common to one I've often heard, because I've often heard gay people say, "Oh, I knew since this event," or I knew since I was this age," or whereas for you it was quite a struggle, I guess, not just to come out to the world, but also to come out to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you host a podcast called Out about people's coming out stories and experiences. And I wondered if that was common amongst the people you've spoken to have quite a confused sort of teenage experience of working out your sexuality with relationship to yourself, but also to the world as well.
Well, I think the thing is, we live in a really heteronormative society. In the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was having my first crushes, that was even more so.
There's a fantastic phrase in your book where which I so identified with, where you said everything was gay, but nothing was actually gay. Because being at school in the 90s,
everything was gay.
Everything was gay.
Yeah, everything was gay.
It was the only pejorative, really.
Yeah, everything was gay, and that meant bad, And so that's all I knew, and I didn't know anyone that was gay. I didn't know. I knew a guy that worked in the pub that my mum and dad sometimes went to was like a camp gay guy, perfectly nice, But I didn't have any, and he was kind of a caricature. I didn't really see him as a real person. He was, don't get me wrong, but he put on this show, and I guess in a way that was his way of defending himself. He was sort of using camp as his armor, and I really didn't want to be gay. I really didn't want to be gay. I really tried to be straight. I put myself in situations that I really regret trying to be straight. And I found it, I was quite disgusted with myself. I thought I was disgusting. And I feel really sad for that version of me now. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and throwing up, and years later, realizing, oh, that only happened when I was having dreams about women. It would literally make me sick. Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird now because I'm so publicly lesbian, and I speak about it a lot. And as you say, I do a podcast about being out, but that's because I want to change the narrative, because I think less so now of people of this generation, but then I think, we're living in a world where it does feel like rights are being rolled back. Like just last year in Italy, lesbian mums, there can now only be one lesbian mum on a birth certificate. So had you if you and your wife previously adopted together or had a child with a donor, you could have both been on the birth certificate. And now it's not just you can't do that, do it going forward. They've now retrospectively changed all of those birth certificates. So
who's that for, that rule?
It would be like if you took your child to a hospital and you weren't the parent on the thing, you couldn't say, give him a heart transplant, do this, do that. It means you have you couldn't travel with your child unless you had, it's just to make gay people's life harder. And that's happening now. That's not a story about, it's something that's happening in another time or that happened a long time ago. And so the reason I like to share queer stories is because I think that the podcast ends up being about queer joy. And I still think that's something that, although we've got stuff like Heartstopper and things like that exist, which are lovely, there's still, I think there's still sort of work to be done. And I think that I sort of make it for teenage me. You didn't ask me why I make the podcast, but I have sort of told you that. But it is something that that has come up quite a lot, that people feel a deep shame.
And is that because the world just assumes so many defaults about people? That does the shame come from a fear that I'm not that default, and that default is also to do with sex to an extent which is, shameful enough as a teenager?
Yeah.
And is it like, I'm going to have to actually tell people about sex in the way that I wouldn't have to if I was straight?
Totally. I mean, it's something that, I imagine you have never had to tell your mum your favourite sex position.
I love having sex with women, Mum.
Yeah.
I would never.
Yeah, you'd never say like, you don't need to say to her, I really like boobs. You don't need to say that. But the weird thing is when you come out, you have to go, I think women are fit. And it's really, weirdly, I think this is very broad and people may disagree with me, but I have seen, colloquially, through friends, they have agreed to, men find it easier to understand lesbian daughters than gay sons, and women find it easier to understand gay sons than lesbian daughters. There is something, I think, in a male psyche, if they have a lesbian daughter that goes, a man's never going to fuck her, I'm fine with that.
Right.
And I think women can and there's, a long documented history of gay boys and their mums understanding each other. But there's something, there's...
Do you think that's also because their sexuality aligns?
I guess so, to a degree. I think so, to a degree. But there's... I do think that it's the norm being different, and you don't want to be different as a teenager, and sex is embarrassing. And then, there was the whole thing at school. Like, I didn't come out of school, but I was terrified that people were going to think that I fancied them all the time. I remember not long after I came out, I was about to move in with my friend Ruth, and I said to her, do you still want to live with me? She said, yeah, of course I do. What are you talking about? I don't care. But I had created this thing so big in my head that everyone was going to hate me, that I was going to lose my family, that I wasn't going to have any friends, that I was going to live a really lonely life, that I still felt like I had to check. And I mean, she's still one of my best friends. She thinks it's crazy that I ever asked that. But it's, it was something that I really, that I found very difficult. And I think it's important to share because 9 times out of 10, the people go, it's fine being gay. No one cares anymore. We're not to be gay people. It's never gay people that say that. It's never people that are experiencing life as a queer person that will say, it's just the same. You can have kids, you can do this, you can do that. It's not, because a straight couple have never had to go, where can we go on holiday that's safe for us to be a family? Or, should we hold hands near a football ground when that team are playing? So it's, it's much, much better, but it's still a journey.
And you talked about like putting yourself in positions which you regret. In your book, you talk about how after your first lesbian experience, you begin a heterosexual relationship to almost are you trying to convince yourself, trying to convince the world?
For sure. Yeah, I was like, this is what you do. And that was just a blip.
So that must have had taken such a huge toll on your sort of interior experience of yourself and the world.
It's horrible.
I'm trying to imagine, like, because I can't put myself in that position.
No.
But is it as clear cut in your head as thinking, right, I think I'm a lesbian, that's not ideal, so I'm going to really just try and do this relationship that sort of the world will accept?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you thinking, I don't really know what's going on here? So
oh no, I knew I was a lesbian. Right. I knew I was attracted to women. From like the first time I saw Kate Winslet in Titanic, it sort of changed my life. I just was in love with her.
Have you ever had the chance to tell her that or get that message to her?
No, I haven't. But Elizabeth Day did buy me a cardboard cutout of her for my birthday that is now in my office at home.
Wow.
There's a big cardboard cutout of her on the red carpet. But I just knew. And I had a really lovely boyfriend, such a nice man who was so kind and so loving and so sweet and so wonderful. And I'm so lucky that I ended up in a sort of 18-month relationship with a man that was like that, rather than a guy that was, I don't know, more pushy or more difficult or whatever. But he was, really sweet and really nice. But, we did have a full relationship. And so, I look back at that time now and think it's really sad that I made myself do that. It was so, it wasn't good for my soul. It just wasn't good for me. And it was, only years later, and indeed in the writing of the book, and I wonder if you found a similar thing, when you start going through things, there's things I've spoken about in the past on stage, but with stand-up, there's a casualness to it. And then also in doing bits, they lose their sort of emotional resonance, because after a while they become the set. So you can talk about heartbreak, you can talk about grief, you can talk about mental health, but because you're performing it every night, it doesn't sting you in the same way. But I found, and also I never type up my stand-up. I always it's a different process for me. And so I found with writing those bits, I felt really sad for that young version of me. And it was interesting because my mum read the book, and there was stuff in there that she didn't know, and there was bits that I hadn't told her about, and she certainly didn't know about some of the mental health stuff that I'd struggled with, because I hadn't wanted to worry her. And now I feel like I'm in a place where I can talk about it, because I feel like I've got over it before, so I can get over it again. But after my mum finished the book, she said, "Oh, I think it's really good, but it made me really sad. Lots of it made me really sad," which I found really upsetting.
Well, I think it's always going to be difficult to read about your child in distress in a way that you can't like dive into the past and save them or help them in the way that you would do if they'd come to you and said, I'm feeling this, or I'm confused about this. So what would you, perhaps for someone listening who might be in a position where they either know that their sexuality is different to the one the world assumes, or perhaps sees a lot of very queer positive stuff on social media that isn't local to them in their life, what would you say to someone who is in a similar situation to the one you found yourself in?
Well, first of all, I think what you're saying is like spot on. I think, so quickly we can look at like, famous YouTubers, I'm talking about for like younger people, but like famous YouTubers that are out and these fabulous queer lives and rainbow flags and rainbow families and all these wonderful things and what prides are like. And then you go back to, for me, it was, I would see like gays in Brighton living their life, and then I'd go back to Portsmouth and be like, God, I can't be one of them. I think that it's like never too late to come out. I would say so you don't need to come out by a certain time. You don't need to feel like, oh, I need to do this now. You need to do it in a place when you're safe, when you've got people around you, and if that's not your family, you need to make sure you've got that sort of support network as friends, because someone reacting badly is really terrible, because my mum and dad have been wonderful, but there was a period where they really didn't get it. And it was really hard because they felt like they didn't know me. When in truth, I was allowing them to know me better.
Yeah. And I guess that's like, so it's the difference between keeping a secret and sharing a secret.
Yeah.
You can sort of view that in two different ways. Can't
Totally.
you?
And I think there was a period definitely where they thought, I wish you'd just never told us.
Wow.
And it wasn't because of their homophobia, it was because they were so worried about what my life would be like.
Mm.
And like, you only have to look into like sort of lesbian literary history, where it's like, you will be sad and alone and pine for a married woman. And
Well, there's an interesting moment in the book where you're talking, I can't remember her name, but you're talking about a sort of an icon in showbiz who comes out. And as a reader, you're thinking, oh, great, here's the example Suzi needs. That's going to be the way this story goes. And then actually, no, the reaction to her makes you think, oh, there's no way. It
was when Ellen came out.
Yeah.
When Ellen came out, and it was the puppy episode for her TV show, and she came out, and I think it was Helen Hunt plays her therapist, and she just got, the show got cancelled. She was kind of blacklisted. She went back to stand up for a bit. Not that was a bad thing, but, she'd been this huge TV persona, and this is like in the 90s when everyone watched sitcom. It's not like now when you've got 1,000 streaming services on your TV. It's like they had the channels, and she was one of the main people on one of the channels. And I remember her and Portia de Rossi I remember feeling so excited about the fact that they were alive. and then they became like a punchline in late night TV show, and it was Ellen DeGeneres. And it told me that I couldn't be a lesbian and be an actress or be someone in the public eye. I can't do that. People don't like that. People don't like people like me. So I think, yeah, and my parents were witness to that as well. It's not that long since there being like, the first gay kiss on EastEnders. A guy called Michael Cashman did that, who I know, who's been on my pod. He did the first gay kiss in EastEnders. And the week that it went out, someone threw a brick through his window, found out where he lived, couldn't leave the house. Like, this is in living history. He's not, I guess he's in his late 60s, early 70s now, but it's not that long ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And, when I was realising these feelings, it was 25 years ago. So there was, certainly now I think that it is much better, but there are still pockets where it won't be. There are countries where it won't be. There are countries where it's getting worse. Farage said a couple of weeks ago that, he doesn't think we should have legalised same-sex marriage. And that when he asked if he would change it, he said, well, I don't know, but I don't think we should have it. And I'm not suggesting reform are going to get in. Jesus, I hope they don't. But, my life is allowed to be a political ball. Even when it comes to, whenever someone is trying to be a political leader, or when we're getting a new pope, it will always be, what are their views on same-sex people? And it's so marginalising. To go, this is what they think about people. They're a humanitarian. They love this. They love that. They're all for people. Oh, by the way, they don't think that gay people should be able to adopt or have children. And it's a thing that is still discussed. Until it stops being discussed, I feel like it will still need to be talked about. I'm really, I just really hope that happens in my lifetime.
You talk about the impact of your mental health on your physical health. You mentioned there earlier about being sick in the night, and you've also had really bad problems with your back, which have been related to your mental health. And I wondered how therapy has not just helped your mind, but also helped your body.
Yeah, for sure.
So could you maybe tell us about your experience with therapy, where it came in the timeline, and what sort of types of therapy you've experienced?
Yeah, of course. So when I was writing the book, it was the first time I really committed to therapy. I'd had it bits and bobs in the past. I'd seen a therapist for 6 weeks or whatever, and then I was like, this is overwhelming. And it was, not long after I'd become a mum, It was, after COVID, work was really up in the air. There were lots of things that I felt like I didn't know whether I was coming or going. And I found a therapist. It felt like, there's a lot of therapists in Brighton where I live. And I wanted...
How did you find them? Because I think that's quite a useful thing for people to hear, because it can be a bit of a sort of,
Yeah,
did you
because
just Google therapy?
Yeah, so I wanted to do a specific type of therapy. So I knew I wanted to do some talking therapy, but I also wanted to do EMDR.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that I wanted someone that did EMDR, and I wanted someone that, I didn't want necessarily a gay therapist, but I wanted someone that worked with same-sex couples. Not that it was really couples therapy, although Alice and I had done a bit of that when we were first becoming parents, because I think it's really good. Mm-hmm. And not because we ever thought about splitting up or anything like that. It was like, how are we going to work this out as when there's like a third person in this? Because we have really worked out our life, how we're going to do it. And we had like these lists of things that were like Alice has always been enormously, she's always had a good job. She's always done really well. And she took a year off when my daughter was little, and she was like, I don't want to feel like I need to ask for stuff for money. I don't want to feel like I need. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, totally agree. I was like, I never need to feel like anyone resents me going to work. She's like, yep, okay, great. And like, we spoke about all the things that could be like our flashpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And then meant that we never really had those arguments, which was great. That's a different thing. That's when we had couples. Anyway, so I wanted to do MDR. I wanted to rewire that part of my brain. So if people don't know about EMDR, you're sort of having talking therapy whilst looking at two different things. It's about your eye movement at the same time as sort of talking about things and having therapy. And you almost go into, I mean, I imagine if my therapist ever listened to this, she'd be like, that's not what it is. But how I felt it is that I wasn't in a trance as such, but I was sort of really deep in an emotional memory. And she was doing this sort of, and how she does it is you have little buzzers in your hands. Uh-huh. So it's like a pendulum, almost like 1, 2, 1, 2, whilst you're having this memory. And the way that I felt it, the way that we sort of spoke about it, and this is very much in sort of layman's terms, but it was almost like it was, almost like wiping away a memory. Memory's the wrong word. It was just my emotional reaction to that memory. I knew there was stuff about the disgust that I had felt as a young person in myself that was directly linked to my anxiety. Feelings that I was having as a teenager about not having many friends, and about being gay and wondering if that was why, and about the fear of losing my family, which never, ever happened. But I really feared it. Even though I knew they loved me, there was just part of my brain that thought, what if? And I knew that there were remnants of those feelings still in my body as a woman in her late 30s. I knew I was still carrying around that. If a friend cancelled on me, I'd think, oh, it's because, of course, I'm the kind of person people would want to cancel on. Why would someone want to hang out with me? And I knew that they were all rooted down to the fact that I found school really hard because I knew who I was, and I was terrified of people knowing who I was. And so from when I was dropped off at school to when I was picked up, I was putting on a show, I was putting on an act, I was thinking, don't let them realise who I am. And that was all still around me. And I can't be a really good wife, and I can't be a really good mum, and I can't be a really good friend and a good daughter, and also have my creative pursuit of being the kind of stand-up that I want to be when I'm carrying that sort of self-loathing. So I knew I needed to do something that was in looking back at how I viewed those moments and slightly changing the narrative so that I could move through them, so that it wasn't exactly what I go back to when I feel shit about myself.
It's interesting that when you were describing that experience of how you felt at school, you're pointing to your body.
Oh, I didn't. So
it's like, because you could say that some forms of talking therapy might work on the premise that once you link the fact that the person on the WhatsApp group doesn't reply or is cancelled to an experience at school, that's sort of the end of the job, because you're like, oh, this isn't about the here and now, this is about old stuff, so it doesn't matter. But I've certainly found that that's like the first step, but the body doesn't hear that bit of logic.
Yes.
So the body needs something else to stop tensing up or to stop, holding breath in or getting nauseous or getting back pain or whatever.
Yeah.
So did you find that form of therapy did sort of like release your body from the weight of those things?
I think so, yeah. I think that I would often have a therapy session and then the next hour I'd go on a really big walk and just be outside and, just by myself for an hour or so. And I found that I would kind of process things. And what my therapist would often say was like, oh, you're processing things when you don't even realize it. Go out and do, but your brain's still working. It's still working through stuff. And it really helped. It really helped. And I really, of course, there'll be days when, the neural pathway of me not getting a text and feeling like that is really well worn. That is a highway that has had, several million cars go over it in its lifetime. And so it is a less, like, I still have to say, no. Like, no, that's, it's, I still have to sort of occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally remind myself where I go, and that's just because of that. And I'm just noticing that.
So because I always get it confused, is it EDMR or EMDR?
EMDR?
EMDR.
One is the music, the electric music.
That's EDM, I think. Electronic dance music, is it?
EDM, yeah. So EMDR.
EMDR. So because it sounds a bit like a magic trick.
Yeah.
It sounds
There's a
like,
rabbit at the end.
Have you ever had to start your Mac in startup mode where you press Control P as it's booting and you're suddenly in this world that you never knew existed?
No, I've never done
if
that.
Your hard drive crashes, it's a way of like accessing underneath the it's mad.
And does it come up like the code?
Well, no, it sort of comes up like with your hard drives on there and then you can go in and clean stuff or recover stuff. But because that might be a really unhelpful analogy, but because EMDR sounds a bit like that, so almost like a cheat code for the brain.
Yeah.
Do you still have like practical conscious tools you can use when, for example, you said you noticed you were going into an anxious phase because you were checking the door?
Mm-hmm. Do
you have stuff that isn't like a magic trick, but is more sort of day-to-day toolkit of stuff?
Yeah, I do. This is something I've been doing since January, so since the 1st of January. And so it was there the whole time that I was going through that anxious phase, but I do think it really helped. I do a lymphatic workout every day now.
Tell me more.
Okay. The internet told me to do it. So it's a thing to sort of get everything going in your body. So I usually do it just before my shower. And you don't need that information, but it's nice for you to know. I want to give you a real picture. So you jump on the spot, you bounce on the spot for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Then you do this with your arms for a minute. Oh, so you pick one arm up, one arm down for a minute. Mm-hmm. Then you do body waves. So up and then like bend over and down for a minute. Then you twist your torso for a minute. Then you pound your arms for a minute. 30 seconds each side.
Uh-huh.
Then you do golf swings. So just swinging back and forth for a minute. Then you touch your toes, like left hand to right foot to left hand, twisting your body as well. Then you do high knees for a minute. And then you do ballet, so like a plie and stretch up and then plie back down for a minute. And it's 10 minutes. And I do that every single morning. And the mornings, well, I was about to say every single morning is in the mornings that I don't, which doesn't make any sense. I try and do that every single morning. Mm. Occasionally I'll miss it and I'll be able to tell by about 3 o'clock.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's the theory of, obviously I can tell it's a good thing to do.
Sure.
Get up, get in your body.
Yeah.
To be flexible, to move early. But what's the sort of thinking behind what it's doing? What are lymphs?
Well, listen, I'm not a doctor and I never said I was.
No.
But we've all got them.
Yep.
And it's good if they're having their own little workout.
Okay.
I think it's about I think detoxifying. Mm-hmm. So it's about your body moving in a way. I think that please, this may be incorrect. So go and do your own research. But I think what it is that by doing these 10 movements, you sort of get a chance to move every part of your body. Mm. So the idea is that new blood is going to rush in new oxygen. And so by the time you finish these 10 exercises, everything will be warmed up and everything will slightly have been detoxified because the blood will be rushing around.
Yeah, and that's like, it's not woo-woo at all, because like pretty much every culture, most religious traditions, most spiritual traditions have movement as part, especially early in the day.
Yes.
Whether it's, yoga or Buddhism or...
Well, this is from, I believe, Tai Chi.
Yeah.
So that's where it's got its roots in Tai Chi, or indeed that's the roots of what like a Tai Chi practice is.
So you mentioned a couple of times that you and your wife have a daughter.
Indeed.
Who's 6 now.
She is, yeah.
And, any queer couple thinking about having kids perhaps it requires a more strategic approach. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair.
So what...
None of us do it by accident.
No. You
don't go, we just stopped using protection and saw what happened.
Yeah.
Because if we stop using protection, it's just friction.
So a lot of planning.
Yes.
And probably lots of discussions about how and when.
Yeah.
How did that interact with your anxiety, especially when it came to sort of families?
Yeah, I think we spoke a lot about all the different ways that we could have a kid, whether we were going to adopt, whether we were going to use a donor. And we went to lots of different sort of seminars about how we could do it. And I think, weirdly, with the anxiety, parenting felt like something I was so sure that I always wanted to do. And when I met Alice, and Alice is sort of, I think in my book, she's like the real hero of the piece. Someone from my publishers met her, and they were like, "Oh my God, the romantic lead," which we loved. But there's a steadiness to Alice that has helped my anxiety massively. And when it comes to parenting, being on her team makes me feel great. And so I think that there was certainly, there was anxieties that came up around parenting. And I think people that, like I know like single mums and single dads that have done it by themselves. And I think they're honestly superhuman. Because doing it in a really good team has, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not easy, but being a parent's a tough thing to do. You just draw in yourself with a pen.
Chin, yeah.
Let me just have a look. And no, there's nothing there.
Okay, this is HD.
Yeah, of course. I think you're good. Luckily, you've got a little bit of stubble. So
yeah, enough. It's actually just more pen.
Oh, right. But I think, always being on that team has been really helpful. But, there are times when, I really worry about her, or I really worry about her future, or what the world's going to look like. But there's only so much. I guess I'm slightly more at peace with that because I'm doing it with someone that I really trust.
Mm. And is having a kid the ultimate version of the reality of finding you've posted a nude of yourself? In that you're constantly getting to resolve the anxieties because you're constantly able to sort of deal with situations.
Well, I think as well as that the great thing that a child has done for me, and I would be the last person to say like, everyone should have a child and your life's not complete without it, because I think people have wonderful complete lives child free. But the great thing that she's done for me, I think, is you constantly get retries at getting things right.
Mm.
The thing that I tell her more than anything else is to keep trying at stuff.
Mm.
And that you learn every time you make a mistake doing something, you learn something from it. And that's a great thing for someone with an anxious mind to remember.
Yeah, and both great advice for a parent and a child.
Oh, I get things wrong all the time.
Mm.
I say sorry to her loads, and I
And in the right way, because you talk about in the book
Yeah.
a really good tactic for how to apologise to a child.
Well, yeah, one of the things I wanted to do with the book was at the end of each chapter, I interview a sort of expert in the area. And sometimes they're experts that they're psychologists or psychotherapists, and sometimes they're more sort of cultural experts, like talking to Dolly Alderton about how to mend a broken heart. And I wanted to talk to a child psychologist about how to, I didn't want it to be like, I want to do a chapter of a parenting book, because that's not what I wanted to do, but I wanted to talk about how I've got an anxious mum, and that's not my mum's fault. She's just an anxious mum, and she had an anxious mum, and I imagine my great-great-grandmother was anxious as well. And I didn't want it to be a foregone conclusion that my daughter would be an anxious person. I wanted to sort of stop that. And so I wanted to talk to a parenting a therapist that works a lot with children about how to take on their worries and concerns without making them enormous, and how to give my daughter ways of dealing with anxiety that maybe I didn't have. And the only reason I don't have is that people weren't talking about this when I was a kid. My mum didn't know what it was like to have, Mum just thought I was a bit weird, I think. She didn't know that I was struggling with an anxiety disorder. And so doing things like getting things wrong and then getting them right in front of them, and and apologizing was a big thing, and how to just get all the things wrong that I'm going to get wrong, but how to do them sort of with kindness, and then show her how making mistakes are really a good thing for children to witness you doing.
Yeah, and the way that I can't remember the exact phrasing, but I think it's useful for me. Like, how do you apologize to someone genuinely? Isn't to go, I'm sorry I shouted, but you pushed me to the edge, or you wound me up, or you did this. It's to go, I'm sorry I got shouted, I got angry, and I didn't deal with that in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that upset you.
Yeah.
It's like, don't leave little hooks and caveats with little get-outs in your apology.
I think that, growing up with a sibling, my brother and I did that all the time to each other. We never apologized to each other properly. And I think, you want them to know you mean it, I imagine, at some point my daughter will have therapy, because I imagine they all will, but hopefully she'll say, but at least she apologized in a nice way.
Well, Suzi, thank you so much for joining us on How Do You Cope. That was a really fantastic chat.
Was it? I don't know. It's great. It's a weird. It's quite weird, isn't it, when you talk to someone that is sort of a friend in such a deep way? I feel very exposed,
especially when they're drawing on their face as you talk.
Oh, you think, is he enjoying it? He's just giving himself a moustache.
And Suzi is going to join us for the gratitude list as well, which I'm very grateful for too. So that was my chat with Suzi, and I'd thoroughly recommend her book, Am I Having Fun Now? I'm delighted that Suzi is joining me again on Thursday for our bonus podcast, The Gratitude List, where she'll be talking me through the 5 things she's grateful for. If you want to get in touch with the show, then send your thoughts and reflections to hello@howdoyoupod.com. Your messages are always so lovely to receive, and we'll cover a lot of them during a future correspondence episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at How Do You Cope Pod. Plus, don't forget, all new episodes of How Do You Cope are now on YouTube, so watch, like, and subscribe there. How Do You Cope is a significant production. See you next time.